I want you to think about something for a moment. Think about the last time you were with your siblings. A holiday dinner, a family gathering, a phone call that started normally and somehow ended with that familiar tension you cannot quite explain. Did you notice anything? Did you notice that without even deciding to, you slipped back into a version of yourself that feels decades old? Was your brother, who always dominated the conversation, was still dominating it? That your sister, who always needed rescuing, was still somehow needing to be rescued? That you were still playing the same role you played at the dinner table in 1967? You are 70 years old. You have lived an entire life. You have raised children, built careers, survived losses, and accumulated wisdom that younger people cannot yet imagine. And yet the moment you walk into a room with your siblings, something shifts. Something old and deeply programmed takes over. And before you know it, you are not the person you have spent 60 years becoming. You are the child you were in your parents' house. That is not a character flaw. That is not a weakness. That is neuroscience. And today I am going to explain exactly why it happens, what it is costing you, and most importantly, what you can actually do about it, starting with your very next sibling interaction. Let me tell you about Robert. Robert is 71 years old. He lives in Denver, Colorado. He is a retired architect, a grandfather of 4, a man who has designed buildings that still stand in 3 states, a man of genuine accomplishment and quiet confidence in almost every area of his life, except one, every Thanksgiving. Robert drives for hours to his older brother's house in Kansas City, and within approximately 45 minutes of arriving, the confident, accomplished architect disappears completely. In his place is a 12-year-old boy trying to prove he is smart enough, successful enough, and worthy enough to earn his older brother's approval. His brother Robert never asks about his work, never acknowledges his accomplishments, talks over him in group conversations, and redirects attention back to himself with the practiced ease of someone who has been doing it for 60 years. And Robert, the grandfather, the architect, the man who has spent decades building things that last, sits there and takes it, and hates himself for taking it. He told me once, "I leave every Thanksgiving feeling like I am 14 again, and somehow I still failed the test I did not even know I was taking." What Robert is experiencing has a name. It is called family role regression, and it is one of the most powerful and least discussed psychological phenomena affecting Americans over 60-5. So what exactly is happening inside your brain when you are around your siblings? Let me explain this simply and clearly. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine. From the earliest years of your life, your brain was building neural pathways based on repeated experiences. The same situations produce the same responses over and over until those responses become automatic, wired in, essentially unconscious. In your childhood family system, roles were assigned very early. The responsible one, the funny one, the golden child, the problem child, the peacekeeper, the invisible one, the caretaker, the rebel. These roles were not chosen consciously. They emerged from the family dynamics, from your parents' needs, from your birth order, and from the specific emotional climate of your household. And here is the critical point. Those roles were practiced and reinforced thousands of times across the years you lived under the same roof. Every family dinner, every holiday, every argument, every moment of praise or criticism or neglect or attention, All of it was training your brain to respond in specific ways to these specific people. By the time you left home at 18 or 20, those neural pathways were not just established, they were deeply carved, like rivers that have been running in the same channels for 2 decades. The water of your emotions and responses knows exactly where to flow when these particular people are present. And 60 years later, those channels are still there, still ready, still waiting to be activated the moment you walk into the room with your brother or your sister. This is why you can spend 50 years building a completely different identity in the outside world and still feel like a teenager. In your parents' house, the moment your sibling says something in a particular tone of voice, the brain does not forget its earliest training. It simply adds new layers on top of it. But the oldest layers are always there beneath. And family, more than any other trigger in human psychology, reaches straight through all those newer layers and activates the original programming directly. Let me talk about the specific roles and what they look like at 70. Because there is a reasonable chance that as I describe these, you will recognize yourself. And if you do, I want you to know that recognition is not judgment. It is the beginning of something genuinely freeing. The oldest child role. If you were the firstborn, your role was most likely some version of responsible, capable, and in charge. You were the one who set the example, who was held to a higher standard, who was given more responsibility than your younger siblings. That role probably served the family well. But at 70, it might look like this. You are still the one managing everything at family gatherings. Still the one who smooths over conflicts. Still the one who feels obscurely responsible when things go wrong. Still, I'm the one who cannot ask for help from your siblings without it feeling like some kind of failure. The middle child role. Middle children were often the negotiators, the ones who learned to read the room expertly, who became skilled at managing the emotional climate between older and younger siblings. At 70, this might look like always being the peacekeeper in sibling conflicts, even when you are exhausted by it. Always moderating, always translating between people, never quite feeling like anyone sees your own needs as clearly as you see theirs. The youngest child's role. The baby of the family often learned that being charming, funny, or in some kind of need was the most reliable way to receive attention in a family where the older siblings had already claimed the serious roles. At 70, this might look like still being dismissed by older siblings, still having your opinions talked over, still being treated as slightly less capable or authoritative, despite decades of evidence to the contrary. The golden child role. If you were the favored one, the one who received disproportionate praise and positive attention, you may have grown up with a fragile sense of self-worth that depends on continued validation. At 70, this might look like needing your siblings to acknowledge your successes in ways that feel desperate even to you, or feeling inexplicably wounded when they do not. The scapegoat role. If you were the one who was blamed, criticized, or identified as the problem in the family system, you may have spent decades trying to prove that narrative wrong. At 70, this might look like still fighting old battles, still trying to be seen as capable and worthy by people who assigned you a different identity 60 years ago. Still feeling the sting of old wounds more sharply than any rational accounting of your adult life would justify. Do any of these sound familiar? Here is the question I want you to sit with for a moment. Who are you actually choosing to be in your sibling relationships? And who are you simply defaulting to because the neural pathway is so old and so deep that it activates before you even realize it is happening? Those are two very different things. And recognizing the difference is where everything begins to change. Now let me tell you about the cost. Because this matters. Research from the University of Michigan's Health and Retirement Study, which has followed thousands of Americans over the age of 54 decades, consistently shows that the quality of sibling relationships is one of the most significant predictors of emotional well-being and physical health in adults over 60-5. Good sibling relationships, characterized by genuine mutual support and authentic connection, are associated with lower rates of depression, better immune function, higher life satisfaction, and measurably longer lives. Toxic or chronically stressful sibling relationships produce the opposite: elevated cortisol, higher rates of depression and anxiety, lower life satisfaction, and a measurable negative impact on physical health. The role you are playing in your sibling relationships right now is either protecting your health or costing it. And if you are playing a role that was assigned to you 60 years ago by a family system that no longer exists, you are paying a price that is not actually yours to pay anymore. So what do you do about it? Because this is the part that matters most. Understanding why it happens is valuable. But I promised you something you could actually use. And here it is. The first step is the most important one, and it requires nothing except awareness before your next significant sibling interaction. Whether it is a phone call, a holiday gathering, or a family event, take 5 minutes and consciously identify the role you are most likely to default to. Name it clearly. Say it out loud if you need to. I tend to become the responsible fixer. Or, I tend to become the invisible one who does not speak up. Or, I tend to become the defensive one who is still fighting 40-year-old battles. Naming the pattern is the single most powerful thing you can do, because it creates a microsecond of conscious awareness between the trigger and the automatic response. That microsecond is where your freedom lives. The second step is to choose one specific behavior you are going to do differently. Not a complete personality overhaul. Not a dramatic confrontation. Just one small deliberate choice. This time, I am going to let my brother finish his story before I respond instead of feeling compelled to redirect. Or, this time, I am going to share my actual opinion about where we eat Thanksgiving dinner, instead of automatically deferring to my older sister. Or this time, I am going to ask for help with something instead of managing everything alone. Small L. Deliberate choices, repeated consistently, are how neural pathways change. Not dramatic transformations. Small repetitions of a different response until a new channel is gradually carved alongside the old one. The third step is to change how you listen. Most of us listen to our siblings through the filter of everything that has ever happened between us. Every old wound, every old grudge, every old dynamic. We hear what they say and we interpret it through that filter automatically. Try something different. Try listening to your sibling as if you were meeting them for the first time today. Not as your bossy older sister. Not as your irresponsible younger brother, but as a 70-year-old human being who has also survived things, lost things, built things, and arrived at this stage of life carrying more than you can see from the outside. When you listen that way, you will sometimes hear something that genuinely surprises you, something that does not fit the old story at all. And those moments of surprise are where genuine adult-sibling relationships, the kind that nourish rather than drain, actually begin to grow. I want to close with something that happened between Robert and his brother last Christmas. Robert had decided he was going to try something different. Not a confrontation, not a speech about their dynamic. Just one small, deliberate choice. When his brother talked over him at dinner, instead of shrinking back the way he had for 60 years, Robert waited for a natural pause and then said calmly and without any edge in his voice, "I was not finished with what I was saying. Can I finish?" His brother looked surprised. Then he said, "Of course. Go ahead," and Robert finished his thought, and his brother listened. And then he said something Robert had not heard in 60 years of family dinners. He said, "That is actually really interesting." That was it. Small, quiet, nothing dramatic. But Robert drove home for hours feeling like himself for the first time at a family gathering in as long as he could remember. He told me afterward, "I realized I had been waiting 60 years for my brother to change. And it took me about 30 seconds to change the dynamic myself. You are not 14 anymore. You are not whatever role you were handed in your parents' house 6 decades ago. You are a full, complex, experienced human being who has every right to show up as your actual self in every room you enter, including the ones with your siblings in them. The role was assigned to you. The decision to keep playing it belongs entirely to you. Tell me in the comments, which childhood role do you recognize in yourself? And has it followed you into your adult sibling relationships? I want to hear your story. Share this video with a sibling who might recognize themselves in it too. That conversation alone, 2 siblings watching this together and recognizing the old dynamic, might be the most meaningful thing that happens in your relationship this year. Subscribe to our weekly videos, because every week we have exactly these kinds of honest and genuinely useful conversations about the real experience of life after 60. Thank you for being here. Now go have a different conversation with your brother or your sister. You might be surprised who shows up on the other side of it.